You can save up to 50% with generic drugs at Walgreens. Ask your Walgreens pharmacist if there is a generic for your prescription.
Chicago's very own 9 o'clock news.
An Iraqi Scud missile makes it past U.S. and Israeli defenses and strikes a residential section of Tel Aviv with devastating impact. At least 3 people died of injuries or heart attacks associated with that Scud missile. Some 70 other people were hurt. Good evening. I'm Rick Rosenthal.
And I'm Allison Payne. This was the 3rd Iraqi missile attack against Israel since the war began, and it had far more serious impact than previous attacks last Friday and Saturday.
Israeli citizens had been told to stay home, and most were there when the air raid siren sounded at 8:30 Tuesday evening in Tel Aviv, 12:30 this afternoon, Chicago time. U.S. anti-missile batteries in place in Tel Aviv just since last Saturday tried to defend. Seen here in slow motion, at least one U.S. Patriot missile was fired aloft, but this time failed to intercept. The Scud struck an area of densely packed 3- and 4-story apartment buildings, flattening one, badly damaging 2 others, and shattering windows and damaging cars for dozens of yards around. Most, if not all, of the casualties were civilians.
I was in the house, yes. We all were in the house, in the room. We put on the mask and we listened to the news. But then after a minute, there was a big explosion and all the walls fell on us, and it was terrible.
Dozens of ambulances and police and army vehicles rushed to the neighborhood where the missile struck. Some victims were trapped in the rubble for several hours before they could be rescued. Israeli officials were quick to condemn Saddam Hussein's latest act of aggression.
This was a terrorist bomb attack on a peaceful civilian population of a country which is not at war with Iraq. This, by the way, constitutes a war crime under international law.
As rescue teams continued their work into the night in Tel Aviv, there was renewed speculation on whether Israel would now retaliate against Iraq. Israeli officials continue to say they will do what is best when it is time.
We're going to take the necessary action, the necessary response that is important for the safety of the citizens of Israel and the cities of Israel. That's our overriding consideration. It was, it remains that.
Israel's Prime Minister Shamir is to meet with his cabinet in just a few hours. They will, of course, discuss this latest Iraqi missile attack and possible Israeli responses to it.
And news of this latest attack on Israel turned the anger up another notch for an already agitated White House. President Bush and his advisors again condemned the Scud launchings as terror attacks rather than military action. And the White House again praised Israel's restraint, as John Aubuchon reports.
President Bush was already gathering his top war advisors when the Iraqi missile hit Tel Aviv. And the news surely landed in the middle of that meeting with an alarming thud. The President, the Secretaries of State and Defense, and Colin Powell, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, watched these first pictures of the devastation as they agreed on language for a new harsh condemnation of Iraq. A statement issued by Press Secretary Marlin Fitzwater calling the attack a continued example of Iraq's unprovoked aggression against its neighbors. We condemn this brutal act of terror against innocent victims, the statement said, and they went out of their way to praise Israel for showing, quoting here, remarkable restraint in the face of this aggression. Sending 2 batteries of Patriot missiles and their crews to Israel was one way the U.S. helped get that Israeli restraint. And there's talk now that more might have to be sent. Might. Deputy Secretary of State Lawrence Eagleburger was still in Tel Aviv when the Scud missile hit today after an urgent weekend flight there to try to persuade Israel not to retaliate against Iraq. But in the meantime, Syria joined Egypt and Saudi Arabia in saying publicly that Israel would have a right to retaliate and that would not split the anti-Iraq alliance. In Saudi Arabia, American military officials said they were still hammering at the Scud missile sites but had not gotten them all. Bush spokesman Fitzwater said the president was getting frustrated over a lack of complete bomb damage assessments from the massive airstrikes. The Pentagon has said the weather's largely to blame for that,
I didn't know that the president was frustrated. I can assure you we're working hard. As I said, the difficulty we've had over the past several days has been bad weather. You can't make a silk purse out of a sow's ear.
There is no White House concern, officials insisted today, over reports that 6 days ago, when the war started, Saudi Arabian troops deployed along the front line immediately retreated. Just as after Iraq's first strike on Israel, the key concern here now is, will Israel retaliate? And if so, how and when? If Israel decides to hit back, it now has promised to coordinate with Washington beforehand, as the Bush administration keeps trying to head off a wider war. At the White House, John Aubuchon, WGN News.
Saudi Arabia was also the target of more Iraqi Scud missiles, both in the early morning hours and in the evening, but without the deadly results of Tel Aviv. In the Saudi capital of Riyadh, Patriot missiles did their job, destroying one Scud in a spectacular intercept. The shell of a Scud fell onto a street in Riyadh where Allied troops checked the nature of its warhead. They found no chemicals. In an early evening shower of missiles near the big airbase at Dhahran, 4 Scuds were picked off in midair by other U.S. Patriot missiles.
Despite the late evening Scud missile attacks on Israel and Saudi Arabia, U.S. military officials are optimistic about the success of Operation Desert Storm. At a military briefing in Riyadh today, U.S. officials announced Navy warships took out 2 Iraqi ships, one of them a mine layer in the northern Persian Gulf. They also say no U.S. warplanes have been lost in the last 24 hours.
I'm encouraged because of the airstrikes that have gone in. I'm encouraged because of the disruption in the command and control. I'm encouraged that we are hurting Saddam Hussein and across the board in the type of targets we're hitting. And I think the campaign is going as planned.
And here's evidence of that campaign. This is new combat video released today, shot from the nose cone of an A-6 fighter, showing a successful U.S. bombing raid on an undisclosed Iraqi target. The Pentagon says the Allied forces have now flown 10,000 sorties in these 6 days of Operation Desert Storm. Destroying Iraqi mobile Scud missile sites remains a top priority. And officials say that they have destroyed 17 Iraqi planes in dogfights, but a British military official says Saddam Hussein still has 80% of his military aircraft.
New development today, there is an undetermined number of oil wells and storage tanks now burning inside Kuwait. The Pentagon has said for some time that the Iraqis have rigged Kuwait's oil facilities with explosives. U.S. military officials report blazing wells and storage tanks at Al Wafra. That's near the Kuwaiti border with Saudi Arabia. It's a small oil field there. Fires are also raging in storage tanks at Shuaiba and at Mina Abdullah, major refineries nearer to Kuwait City. At the Pentagon, the Director of Operations for the Joint Chiefs of Staff was asked what effect such fires might have on Allied ground forces wanting to invade Kuwait.
If they all went and a great pall of smoke hung over it, it could have an effect on operations. If we were electing to go where those oil field fires were occurring, my surmise is we would try to avoid that. It's hypothetical in that it hasn't happened yet. It certainly is possible. It certainly could have an effect. If it did have an effect, that's what war is. You know, he tries something, you try something. We would look for another way to do the job.
The head of the Canadian forces in the Persian Gulf, Commodore Ken Summers, says the Iraqis may have blown up some of the wells to create dense smoke that would, in fact, give Iraqi troops cover from constant aerial bombardment. He also suggested some of the installations might have been hit accidentally by Allied ordnance.
Meanwhile, the Iraqis paraded 2 more Americans before television cameras today. The 2 men identified themselves as Captain Harry Michael Roberts and Major Jeffrey Ties of the U.S. Air Force 614 Tactical Fighter Squadron. They said they were F-16C pilots and that they had been on a bombing mission before being captured. The same Iraqi television broadcast also showed pictures of what allegedly were parts of Allied aircraft and a cruise missile Iraq claims to have shot down. Also, there are new reports that Baghdad is in ruins. Western peace activists report the city is without water, sewage, or fuel.
Still to come on the 9 o'clock news, a demonstration supporting American forces in the Persian Gulf.
While Illinois veterans denounce anti-war protests.
Now you can eat cake.
Maybe you can.
No, you can eat this luscious cherry-filled coffee cake.
I don't think so.
But you can. These new Entenmann's cakes have no fat and no cholesterol. Just quality ingredients like Dole pineapple, Chiquita bananas, even Dutch cocoa.
You're really serious.
Ingredients we've used for over 90 years. Entenmann's, baking the best every day since 1898.
Raspberry twist.
You can eat cake.
Oh, yeah.
Bows Nose baseball.
Bows Nose football.
Bows knows basketball, too.
Nice shoes.
Bows knows news?
No.
Bows knows movies.
Bows knows.
You try to give your kids the best of everything.
Patrick!
The best clothes. The best toys. The best education. Even juice made from the best oranges. Florida Gold.
Patrick!
It's squeezed only from Valencia oranges, the best tasting, most expensive kind. But just like everything else, once you give it to them, you have to replace it. Florida Gold brand orange juice. It's pure Valencia.
From the Far East to Europe. Across the Caribbean and throughout North America, only one airline covers so much of the world with so much warmth.
Since Operation Desert Storm began 6 days ago, the nation has seen a number of anti-war protests. Now a group called Operation Home Front wants servicemen, both men and women, to know that they are behind them. Hundreds of people rallied in Daley Plaza today in support of U.S. troops in the Gulf, as Joni Lum reports.
The people of Operation Homefront say they want to send a message overseas, a signal of support for the troops serving in the Middle East. Some veterans say this rally will have a lasting effect on the troops.
I think rallies like this that show the other side give a real morale booster and let the people know in their hearts they're doing the right thing.
I think it's very important that the public opinion be heard to the troops that are over there, because it affected me, and I think it affects them, and I want them to know that at least I support what they're doing.
They say those young men and women have taken on a tough task, and now it is the public's duty to be patriotic.
USA! USA! USA!
And it's time to be tolerant of opposing ideas.
Understand that most of those who disagree are not traitors, nor are they lesser citizens. They simply are celebrating the American Constitution and their right to protest.
Some demonstrators admitted that seeing the anti-war protests on television drove them to join the rally at Daley Plaza.
They're over there carrying our flag for us, and they look at the television media reports, and they see people back here burning the flag, and it's sort of demoralizing to them.
This group does not want to be mistaken for a pro-war force. They are simply pro-GI. Their numbers might seem smaller than the anti-war forces, but they say their opinions are more popular. At Daley Plaza, Joni Lum, WGN News.
Illinois' veterans of war also took aim at anti-war protesters today. They urged peace activists to think before they speak out. Members representing 120 veterans groups today prayed for the safe return of American forces in the Gulf and offered their unequivocal support. Those present also denounced the militant and violent anti-war protests.
The Illinois Attorney General's office. Remember that potentially somebody, a family member's watching. What about the pain in their heart, proud of their son or daughter, and thinking, gee, don't they understand the sacrifice here? So I'd hope all Americans, you know, it's not us against them. We're Americans. So we want to circle the wagons, rally behind our troops.
The veterans also asked federal officials to make verbal or physical abuse of vets returning home from the Gulf punishable as hate crimes.
Many Chicago area residents are keeping an eye on developments in the Middle East for very personal reasons, perhaps because of loved ones in the military. Others have family or friends perhaps in Israel, and some have loved ones in Iraq. Dalur Daoud is a teacher here in Chicago and has 2 brothers and 2 sisters still living in Iraq. Daoud fled Iraq more than 10 years ago because of turmoil there. He told WGN reporter Mary O'Clair he hates the war but feels the U.S. had no choice but to attack Saddam Hussein.
This is crazy. It shouldn't, have started from the beginning. They should have resolved their problem, peacefully, and in a way they sit, together. But this guy is very adamant. He's very stubborn, and he thinks that he's, the godfather, in that region. Whatever he wants, he can do it, and he can get away with it.
Daoud says support for Hussein is not unanimous in Iraq, a country, he points out, that does have Christian, Arab, and Kurdish citizens, many of whom have been victimized by Saddam Hussein.
Coming up, how the Gulf War has triggered a kind of information explosion.
And a suburban company gets ready to ship some of its high-tech equipment to our forces in the Middle East.
It's incredible. I never thought one cereal could make my whole family stay for breakfast. Honey Bunches of Oats.
Nothing else is that taste, nothing else is that crunch. Honey Bunches of Oats, one great taste for your whole bunch.
There's never been a cereal that mixes crispy flakes of corn and wheat with crunchy bunches of honey roasted oats. That's why there's never been a cereal that tasted like this.
Honey Bunches of Oats.
Finally, a cereal my whole family loves.
They look good.
They work good.
Have you got your pearls on?
Yeah, they got this thing.
Guaranteed. Guaranteed they'd be perfect. Have you got your pearls on?
I sat on.
Whoa.
And they fixed them for you, huh?
Yeah.
She said no charge.
I bought these with a coupon, and they gave me a second pair.
Those are real nice pearls.
Why just wear glasses when you can put on pearls?
One thing I like about them, they don't slide off my kisser.
Pearl and Pearl Vision Express for glasses in 1 hour. Call 1-800-YES-EYES for locations.
Why aren't you wearing a fur?
I can't afford it.
Now, during Maple Furrier's clearance sale, you can finally afford the fur you love instead of trying to love the fur you can afford. Every fur is now half price or lower. Stop in and try on these beautiful coats. You'll love the touch, the feel, and the look of your maple fur. And remember, if you don't know furs, know your furrier.
Better hurry. Those prices can't last.
Quaker Oat Squares. You're gonna love them from square one. Love that crunch.
Love the toasty taste. Love the touch of brown sugar.
Surprise! Quaker Oat Squares. You're gonna love them from square one.
Company in northwest suburban Niles is soon going to be shipping out high-tech computer gear for troops serving in the Persian Gulf. It is new hardware that's designed to help computers operate more efficiently in desert sands. Steve Sanders reports.
The important role of electronics in the Persian Gulf conflict have led some to call it the Nintendo War. The laser-guided missiles fired by Allied warplanes often take on a video game appearance. Now a Chicago area manufacturer of electronic game peripherals is out with a new product, which the Army is ordering for use in the Persian Gulf War.
What we have here, Steve, is a mouse emulator. And what we've done is we've designed a product that will do everything that a mouse will do, but not take up the space that a mouse does.
Suncom Technologies calls this new product the iController. Designed for laptop computers, the Army wants the product not only because it uses less space than a computer mouse, but it also is less likely to pick up desert sand in the Middle East. Doctors at Walter Reed Army Medical Center have ordered the product for use with laptops at Army field hospitals.
It's their information people who need to access medical records and information back in the United States. And they'll hook up their laptops to modems, and they'll be able to get an enlisted man's total medical records from his blood type to any other information that they need.
When the iController went into production back in October, it was viewed solely as a consumer electronic product. Company officials had no idea the military might find an application for it.
We knew that there was a great deal of application for laptops, and we knew that the military was getting into the laptops, but frankly, no, we didn't expect the military to come in and order it. It's a nice surprise to see them do it.
While military computers are all too often used for death and destruction, this is one computer product that may indirectly save lives.
We certainly don't consider ourselves defense contractors. This device is used by the hospital and medical personnel in the armed forces in Saudi Arabia, and we're comfortable in the fact that the ultimate result of that should be positive as opposed to destructive.
Company officials declined to reveal just how many eye controllers the Army has ordered, calling it only a modest number. But they add the Navy is also interested in the product. Steve Sanders, WGN News.
Suncom says the eye controller will help soldiers access computers even if those soldiers have had no special computer training.
The war in the Persian Gulf has caused Americans to thirst for more information about the region and the weaponry used in Operation Desert Storm. As Larry Roderick reports, business is booming for stores that sell war paraphernalia.
The newspapers have stepped in to give us permanent reference points for the Middle East conflict, but the public's appetite appears to be insatiable. Map stores such as the Rand McNally outlets are selling out their stocks of maps and reference books, and the sales are keeping pace with frantic reorder efforts.
As soon as Kuwait was invaded, the demand grew, and we started sort of hustling, trying to find maps of the Middle East. There wasn't a big demand, not a lot of travel there prior to that time.
Bookstores report a surge in sales of maps, but it is the books that have begun to fill in the information gaps left over from TV's immediate, if fleeting, coverage of the war and the people waging it.
I think Crocs and Rentano's customers, like Americans everywhere, couldn't get enough information about the area, the politics, the situations that exist in the Middle East.
So the shelves are crammed with heavy tomes on political history, instant treatises on Saddam Hussein and his pronouncements, and everything we're allowed to know about the weapons being used. The lure of weaponry has also meant a business boom for the hobby shops, where models, amazingly realistic models, are in demand.
The more often there are pictures of aircraft and war machinery and so forth exposed to the public, makes them conscious of the fact that maybe we ought to look into building a model. So, however, I want it to be known, we are not one that is happy to see this. We don't mind the additional business, but it's a shame that we have to bring it to the interests of the people through a war.
This is Trostad's one instance where a hobby becomes a learning experience. This is Larry Roderick, WGN News.
Coming up, a look at the other news of this day, including approval for a postal rate increase.
And the first budget of Cook County Board President Richard Phelan already is coming under fire.
What's going on here?
We're making fresh pasta that's cholesterol-free.
Cholesterol-free fresh pasta? Terrific.
Yeah, it's from DiGiorno Fresh.